we have a moral requirement to do that. Now, in doing that, we can make a lot of people happy, but in the production of more people happy, some things that we endorse may not be morally correct. Like we have 10,000 Romans in the Colosseum and we're going to feed 6 Christians to the lions. Well, if you just do numbers, a calculus, that's an awful lot of happy people, probably delirious. But you're going to have 6 people very unhappy. So the problem, and we'll get into this, I'm going to give you criticisms of Mill's theory. I'm going to give you 6 of them. 5 will major on. The 6th one I want to have a conversation about. How do we calculate happiness when it comes to personal happiness? I mean, you say you're happy. How happy are you? I don't know how to calculate that. You may not know how to calculate it either. If it's just a numbers game, well, we could go back to slavery. We can go back to the Colosseum. We can have a whole lot of negative consequences for a small number of people, and most of us might be happy about it. And yet Mills knows that that's not really moral, that that violates people's civil liberties. It violates their right to freedom and to life. Okay? So one of the biggest downfalls with it is, if you follow the theory, you could produce happiness for many, many people, but some people might have to endure not just unhappiness, but injustice as a result. Should we get all the balance of that together then? Help me out. Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to go through 6 criticisms today. And by the way, I posted this. The principle applies to individual acts, how you deal with people individually. That's how we deal with most people most of the time. Someone needs a favor from you. Do you really want to do it? Is it going to put you out, but it would make them more happy? Have I talked to you about my friend Ken who had liver cancer? Did I say that in this class? I had a friend with liver cancer. It had gone away. It came back. Say again? He didn't want the chemo. Yeah, when he left, he knew he was dying. I didn't owe him things like the truth. His wife wanted to know if he was going home to die. She had never done it. Ken had taken care of the family the whole time. Wage earner, paid taxes, paid bills. Marcia didn't know how to do any of it. We had to gather people around her because in 2 weeks, Ken was probably going to be gone. She was going to need help. Okay, so the principle of utility applies to individual. Now, was she real happy to hear he was going home to die? No, but she needed to hear it. It was a matter of truthfulness, so we could try and facilitate her life a little bit so when she got over the loss, she could maybe still be able to go forward. She had 2 children, a 13-year-old girl, a 16-year-old boy. The principle can also apply to rules. No lying, stealing, cheating, raping, robbing. Those we all agree to. Minimum wage. We're going through an argument right now in the newspapers and on the media about whether people can come here or not come here, how they come in. These are rules. How do we apply the rules? Is it making everybody happy, a minimum number of people, 50-50, and we have to be able to work this out. If we don't work it out, then we live in a system without justice. The rules are just rules. There has to be a way that we can accommodate everybody. Not that everybody's happy. You may get 80% of what you want in this life and be happy with it. Maybe that's all you're going to get. And you'll say, okay, well, that's just. I can live with that. Some people get 20% and they think that's injustice. Some people get nothing. They're always excluded from the system. For them, there's no justice at all. So how we apply these rules is real important, and how it affects us personally, which means that the principle is not just theory, people. We're talking about it in theory now. After I get done with the basic lecture on the criticisms, I'm going to show you a video by a professor from Harvard named Michael Sandel, the best political philosopher we have right now, and he deals with this subject in his classroom, and he will raise real issues. So we go right out of theory, and now we have to deal with real issues, how this gets applied to us. As long as everybody benefits, it's like, oh yeah, the principle of utility, but what happens when we're stuck between a rock and a hard place? And it's not that easy to make those decisions, and that's what he'll do in the lecture, and then I'm going to maximize it when we're done with the video. It's about 9.5 minutes. Okay? So let's go over some of the criticisms. First one is probably the strongest one because it's based on a misunderstanding, a true, absolute misunderstanding. It says utilitarianism, or hedonism, appeals to the base nature of man. That is, to suppose that life has no higher end than pleasure, they designate as utterly mean and groveling, worthy only as swine. What does that mean? Well, what he means is to be a hedonist, or someone who gets off on pleasure, you're no better than a pig that just plays in the mud. Well, that begs the question, why do pigs play in mud? Have any farmer people? Why do pigs play in mud? They cool off, absolutely, yeah. Why else? You all city folk? What acts as a sunscreen? The mud acts as a sunscreen. But why else? Don't you remember when you were 4 or 5 and it would rain, it quit raining, you go outside and play? There's a big puddle, and everybody's laughing except, I'm sorry, did I do that to you again? And everybody's laughing except. I clearly remember going to high school one day. I just bought some brand new clothes. I mean, styling clothes, and I'm all dressed in them. I'm walking to school on the sidewalk, and it had just rained the night before, and the curb would always have, a certain amount of water running down. Yeah, and so I'm walking to school, and this truck goes by, a mutter truck, big, big wheels, and he sees me. He's got 2 of his buddies, so there's 3 against 1, and he sees me walking on the sidewalk, and he sees this big accumulation of water right up against the curb, and he just roars through that. And they laugh all the way down to school, and I'm dripping wet in mud and water, and I got to go back and change my clothes. But to them, that was funny as could be. I go out walking on the highway, and someone will go by, and then you just hear them laughing all the way down while I try and get back in my suit again. It's like, wow. Well, Mill says, what's wrong with having fun? What's wrong with enjoying pleasure? Well, see, John Stuart Mill was born at the time that Queen Victoria was born. And that's the Queen. And she's in power of England at the end of what we call the Puritan Revolution. And don't take offense at this, but during Queen Victoria's time, women laid on their back and didn't enjoy it. Prostitution was, rules against it, gambling. I mean, they were about as tight as you could get. My mother was raised in what we call Victorian Canada. Did I talk about this in this class at all? She was born in Vancouver, British Columbia, but she moved to Banff, which now is this big resort. It was just a farm, so she lived with grandmother. And, it's the old, who's those country people, Dunn and somebody, the country singers? Long Clay Road. And, yeah, Brooks and Dunn, yeah, Long Clay Road, She lives at the end of it, 4 farms down. So she gets off of school, and she's walking down the country road to Grandma's house, and there's Bessie, her cow. And Bessie, her cow, is pregnant and about ready to drop her calf right out on the road. And so Bessie drops her calf. My mother's never seen it, so she stops to look at it. Well, see, in Victorian Canada, decent women didn't do things like that. So the neighbor lady came out with a switch. Switch is a tree limb, thin one, and she switched my mother all the way home because decent women don't look at that. Wow. And John's born into Victorian England. It was so bad in Victorian England when Christopher went to the New World. You know who Chris was? The Columbus guy. That guy, yeah. The Spaniard. Well, when he comes back, he brings a couple of things with him. He brings gold. He brings chocolate. He brought bananas with him. Well, by the time that migrates out of Spain into England, the Queen got a look at what Chris brought home, and she said that the chocolate can come in and the gold can come in, but you can leave the bananas outside. Now, why would she leave the bananas outside? Kind of a visual representation of, and the Queen couldn't deal with it. John grew up with this stuff. It's like, really? Oh, it feels so good. I used to teach my kids every day. Oh, you don't have a kid. I used to teach them to sit there. I said, do this to me. Here, let me show you. And I do it. Then they go, oh, that feels so weird. And I said, well, it doesn't feel weird to me. Just keep doing it. I'll tell you when to stop. I mean, it never stops. It just feels too good. You know what I mean? No, you don't know what I mean. How many of you want less pleasure rather than more? I mean, John just woke up one day to the fact people have skin and they have feelings, and we'd rather have good feelings than bad feelings. And that was completely against what the Queen was saying. So as far as the Queen was concerned, if you were into pleasure, you were no better than a pig who just wallows in the mud. Well, sorry, Queen, but you got that wrong, and the rest of us got it right. But we had to go through that period. Criticism number 2, utilitarianism is selfish and self-centered, interested only in maximizing the pleasure of the individual. What's the word picture? The greatest happiness for the greatest number. Where you can increase happiness, you have a moral obligation to do it. It's just not, if it's just you and you're the only one being affected, knock yourself out, do whatever you want to. You're the only one involved. But wherever 2 or more are involved, we have a moral requirement to increase pleasure where we can. So it's not about being selfish and self-centered. I mean, if it's just you, of course it's selfish and self-centered, but the principle speaks to society. And morality then becomes a moral mandate to have to increase as much happiness as we can, or reduce, bless you, or reduce the amount of unhappiness that people experience. So it's not about being selfish and self-centered. That's a misunderstanding of utilitarianism. Third criticism, utilitarianism sets the bar too high in moral decisions for society as a whole, which begs this question. When you were born and put in a box, that was your ceiling. Anybody object to it on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4? We have no idea. Those are the rules of social engagement. We all learn to grow up and live by them. No lying, stealing, cheating, raping, robbing. Now, some societies, they have a different ceiling. And some societies have an even different ceiling. But whatever ceiling is, when you're put in that box, at least to you becomes what we call an age of accountability, the ability to think through these values. That's the bar. You just live within the box because that's your box. No lying, stealing, cheating, raping, and robbing. And you learn very quickly that as soon as you put your hairy toe across the line, the law is designed to keep you in the box. And most of us rarely are willing to step outside the box intentionally. We'll get to that later on in the semester. It's called civil disobedience. Most of us are content to live within the box. In a society like ours, where we have libertarian values, sometimes the box gets larger and sometimes the box gets smaller. After World War I, we call that the Roaring '20s, because people up until then, women and men, used to dress from here all the way down to there. You could not show skin. Women, do you ever see them? You have these white blouses and black skirt, and men would wear black, we call them claw-tail hammer suits with, you know, the big tails, and they have the big parboiled. Yeah, and that's how people dress. And then after World War II, see, we've been in Europe. Europe has a different look at the world. Over in Europe, I remember the first time we did laundry run with the military, went up to Würzburg, about 35 kilometers north. Someone had to go to the bathroom. There's all guys in the truck, so they just pulled off the side of the Autobahn. They said, just make sure you go on the leeward side. And I looked at the guys next to me, I said, we can urinate outside? And they said, just make sure you face away from traffic. And I said, you got to be kidding me. He says, no. Europe's different than America. You do that in America, they'll nail you for indecent exposure. In Europe, hey, you got to go to the bathroom, go. Just be a little cool about it, you know. And you go behind the truck, so you're even a little cooler than normal. Then the Roaring '20s came, and women decided that they were going to raise their skirts to their knees. And people said, oh my gosh, the devil got loose. And people freaked right out. And they went back to wearing, in my generation, women used to wear sack dress. You know what a sack dress is? That's where you take a burlap sack and you cut a hole in the top and 2 sides and you pull it over your head and put your arms through and you put a belt around it. That was called a burlap. That was a sack dress. You know, it's like, are you kidding me? And then when we got hip, my generation not only invented the miniskirt, we invented the micro miniskirt, and now they were sure the devil got loose in the house. R&B, rock and roll, oh, they just freaked right out over us. In our society, then the box kind of expands and it shrinks right back up. It grows with the times and the times. Some they don't. But to accuse the bar as being too high, Mills would say, no, look, the bar is the bar, people. In fact, until you get to the age of accountability where reason kicks in and you can do abstract thinking, I bet many of you, up until maybe, I don't know, 5, 10 years, never questioned the values you were born with. I had a friend who since retired. She's Republican when it comes to politics. Her sons both voted Democrat. She threw a fit one day at lunch. She says, I didn't raise my kids to be Democrats. And I thought, you